There is a specific electric tingle that happens at the very back of your jaw the moment a grain of sugar hits your tongue. It's a sharp, almost metallic prickle that causes your salivary glands to ache for a split second before a wave of artificial warmth floods your chest. You probably think that sensation is a reward, a little gift from your brain for finding a high-energy snack. You might even think it's a modern luxury, something our rugged, cave-dwelling ancestors never had to worry about. But that is the paradox of the human condition. We are a species defined by our intelligence and our tools, yet we are held hostage by a chemical reaction that is older than the mountains. That tingle in your jaw isn't a modern convenience. It is a ghost. It is the echo of a biological desperation so profound that it shaped the very shape of your skull and the color of your eyes. We didn't just start eating sugar recently. We were forged by it, and the real story of our first bite is far more dangerous than a trip to the candy aisle. You might assume that our ancestors lived in a state of perfect, sugar-free grace, eating only lean meats and bitter roots until the invention of the donut. That version of history is comfortable, but it is entirely wrong. The idea that sugar is a new problem ignores the most basic evidence written in our own skeletons. If you look at the fossil record, you don't find a sudden spike in sugar consumption coinciding with the invention of agriculture. Instead, you find something much more unsettling. Our ancestors were chasing sweetness long before they were even human. The myth of the sugar-free, prehistoric diet falls apart the moment you look at the teeth of a creature called Egyptopithecus succis. This wasn't a human, or even a great ape. It was a small, tree-dwelling primate that lived in what is now Egypt about 30 million years ago. When researchers like dental anthropologist Ian Tall from the University of Otago began examining the fossilized remains from the Fayum Depression, they expected to find the wear and tear of a tough, fibrous diet. They expected chips and cracks from crushing seeds and nuts. Instead, they found cavities. That seems like a minor detail, yet it appends everything we thought we knew about the origins of our diet. Caries, or cavities, are almost non-existent in animals that eat a natural diet of leaves and stems. They only appear when a mouth is constantly bathed in fermentable carbohydrates, specifically, the sugars found in very ripe fruit. Out of 421 teeth analyzed in a 2021 study, Tall and his colleagues found that these ancient primates had dental decay rates that rival modern humans in some agricultural societies. This wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a lifestyle. These creatures weren't just eating sugar, they were specialists in it. They were seeking out the most sugar-dense fruits in the canopy, millions of years before a single human foot ever touched the ground. This suggests that our addiction isn't a failure of modern willpower. It is a foundational trait of our lineage. We didn't learn to love sugar, we were built from the ground up to find it, or die trying. However, having a taste for sugar is one thing. Having a body that can actually survive on it is a completely different problem. You might think that eating fruit is an easy way to live, but for most of primate history, sugar was a trap. Around 15 million years ago, during the middle of the Miocene epoch, the world began to cool. The lush, tropical forests of Africa and Eurasia started to thin out, replaced by open woodlands and seasonal scrub. For our ancestors, the endless fruit buffet was over. This created a massive biological crisis. Fruit was only available at certain times of the year, and during the long, cold droughts, there was nothing to eat. Most species simply went extinct. But our ancestors survived because of a freak mutation in a single gene. That mutation sounds like a miracle, but it was actually a terrifying adaptation for a world of starvation. Researchers, including Dr. Richard Johnson from the University of Colorado, have identified a specific change in the way our ancestors processed fructose, the sugar found in fruit. Most animals process fructose slowly, using it as immediate fuel. But 15 million years ago, a mutation in the uricase gene allowed our ancestors to convert fructose into fat with terrifying efficiency. It acted like a biological on switch. The moment these primates tasted sugar, their metabolism didn't just burn it, it locked it away as body fat. This allowed them to gorge themselves during the short fruiting season and wear their calories as a literal life jacket through the starving months. If you feel like you can't stop eating sugar once you start, It's because you are the descendant of the one primate who didn't stop. The ones who ate a reasonable amount of sugar are all dead. They didn't have enough fat to survive the winter. You are here because your ancestors were the most efficient gluttons in the forest. This doesn't mean that sugar was easy to come by, though. On the contrary, once our ancestors moved out of the trees and onto the savanna, the easy sugar of ripe fruit became a rare, precious commodity. This is where the story takes a violent turn. If you can't find fruit, you look for the most concentrated source of sugar in the natural world: honey. We often think of honey gathering as a quaint, pastoral activity, but for an ancient human, it was an act of high-stakes atmospheric warfare. We have direct evidence of this from a site called the Cueva de la Araña in Valencia, Spain. There, a rock painting dating back roughly 8,000 years shows a human figure clinging to precarious vines, surrounded by oversized, angry bees. The figure is reaching into a dark hole in a cliff face. This isn't a scene of a person gathering a snack. It's a scene of a person risking a lethal fall and 1,000 stings for a few handfuls of liquid gold. Sugar wasn't a dessert back then. It was a drug that kept you alive, and the lengths we went to get it were extreme. We see this even today in the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last true hunter-gatherer societies on Earth. For the Hadza, honey isn't just a treat. It can account for up to 15% of their total caloric intake. They have a symbiotic relationship with a bird called the greater honey guide, which literally leads humans to hives in exchange for the leftover wax. This isn't just a clever trick. It is a deep, evolutionary partnership built on the back of our shared obsession with sugar. The Hadza will spend hours chopping into a baobab tree, braving swarms of stinging bees, just to get a taste. When they find a hive, they don't save it for later. They eat it until they physically cannot swallow anymore. They are living out the exact biological program that mutation 15 million years ago gave us. See sugar, get sugar, store sugar. Despite this ancient drive, the actual history of sugar, the stuff in the white bags, is surprisingly short. It's easy to assume that once we figured out honey, we just naturally moved to sugarcane. But the reality is that sugarcane was a useless, tough weed for most of its existence. It started in New Guinea, around 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. The wild grass, Saccharum robustum, was incredibly fibrous. You couldn't eat it. You had to chew on the stalk, suck out the sweet juice, and spit out the woody pulp like a piece of exhausted gum. It was a lot of work for a very small reward. For thousands of years, sugar remained a local secret of the Pacific, a marginal crop that didn't really change the world. That lack of impact changed, however, when the plant made the jump to mainland Asia, specifically India, around 350 AD. This is the moment the trap was truly set. Before this, sugar was always attached to something: fiber in fruit, stings in honey, wood in a cane stalk. But the chemists of the Gupta Empire figured out how to do something unnatural. They discovered how to boil the cane juice down and turn it into solid crystals. They called it khanda, which is where we get the word candy. For the first time in 30 million years, sugar was divorced from the physical struggle of the natural world. It was no longer a seasonal find or a dangerous prize. It was a stable, portable, pure chemical. It was the first time humans had managed to concentrate a biological drive into a shelf-stable product. But even then, sugar didn't take over the world overnight. For nearly 1,000 years, it was a medicine for the elite, a spice more expensive than black pepper. In 11th century England, a single pound of sugar could cost as much as 2 weeks' wages for a laborer. It was so rare that it was kept in locked boxes. We have records of kings and queens in the Middle Ages whose teeth were black and rotten because they were the only ones who could afford to indulge in the new, white gold. To everyone else, sugar was still a myth. This is the part of the story that feels like a mystery. If we were so evolved to love sugar, why didn't it immediately become the foundation of our diet as soon as we could crystallize it? The answer is as brutal as it is simple: we couldn't grow enough of it. Sugarcane is a thirsty, greedy plant that requires tropical heat and a staggering amount of human labor to process. It wasn't until the 15th and 16th centuries, when European powers discovered the Americas, that the supply finally met the demand. This is the darkest chapter of the sugar story. The sugar you eat today isn't just the product of biology. It is the product of an industrial system built on the back of the largest forced migration in human history. To satisfy the ancient, mutated urge for sweetness in the European palate, millions of enslaved Africans were brought to the Caribbean to work in the killing mills of the sugar plantations. As the anthropologist Sidney Mintz famously pointed out in his book, Sweetness and Power, sugar was the first true global commodity. It was the thing that fueled the Industrial Revolution. It provided cheap, fast calories for the factory workers in London and Manchester, allowing them to work longer hours on less food. Sugar didn't just change our teeth, it changed our history. But if you think that the rise of the sugar plantation was the final step in our journey, you're missing the most important shift of all. Because while we were changing the world to produce more sugar, the sugar was changing the very bacteria that live inside us. This is where the biological evidence gets truly haunting. You might blame the invention of agriculture for the decline of human health, but a 2013 study led by Christina Adler at the University of Adelaide found something far more specific. By studying the calcified plaque on ancient skeletons, her team was able to track the DNA of the bacteria in the human mouth over 7,500 years. What they found was that the oral microbiome, the ecosystem of bacteria in your mouth, was actually remarkably stable for thousands of years, even after we started farming wheat and barley. But then, right around the start of the Industrial Revolution, the diversity of that ecosystem collapsed. One specific type of bacteria, Streptococcus mutans, suddenly exploded in population. This is the bacteria that causes cavities. It thrives on refined sugar and produces acid that dissolves your teeth. Before the 1800s, mutans was a bit player in the human mouth. After the 1800s, it became the dominant force. We didn't just change our diet, we effectively terraformed our own bodies to favor a pathogen that eats us from the inside out. None of this would be a problem, of course, if our bodies had evolved to handle this new abundance. But that's the catch. Evolution is slow, and the grocery store is fast. We are walking around with the metabolism of a 15-million-year-old starving primate, living in a world where pure energy is cheaper than water. That mutation that allowed us to store fat from fruit? It's still there. That dopamine hit from the honey-guide bird? It's still there. But the scarcity that kept those traits in check is gone. We are a species designed for a world that no longer exists, and our own success has turned our survival mechanisms into a slow-motion catastrophe. That brings us to a shocking realization that most people refuse to accept. We often talk about sugar as if it's a toxin or a poison, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually happening. Sugar isn't an intruder in the human story. It is the protagonist. For 30 million years, the search for sugar was the primary engine of primate evolution. It's the reason we developed three-color vision, so we could spot the specific red and yellow of a ripe fruit against a sea of green leaves. It's the reason we developed larger brains, to map the locations of fruiting trees and remember the timing of the seasons. It's even the reason we have such dexterous hands, to peel the skins of fruit and rob the nests of bees. We didn't learn to eat sugar. Sugar built the human being. This is the big reveal that changes everything. We like to think of ourselves as masters of our environment, but when it comes to sugar, we are just the delivery mechanism. The plant, the bee, the fruit, they all used our craving to ensure their own survival. The fruit tree wants you to eat its sugar so you'll poop out its seeds somewhere else. The sugarcane wants you to clear the rainforests of the world to plant more of its stalks. We think we are the ones consuming the sugar, but the sugar has been consuming our behavior, our labor, and our history for millions of years. We aren't the ones in control. We are just the latest version of a 30-million-year-old experiment in how much energy a single organism can hoard before it breaks. And it is breaking. If you look at the statistics, the mismatch between our ancient genes and our modern environment is becoming a literal weight we cannot carry. In the year 1700, the average person in England consumed about 4 pounds of sugar a year. By 1800, that had jumped to 18 pounds. Today, the average American consumes somewhere between 130 and 150 pounds of sugar every single year. That is a 3,000% increase in just 3 centuries. Our bodies haven't changed at all in that time. We are still that primate in the tree, but we've replaced the occasional piece of fruit with a fire hose of pure glucose. The result isn't just a few cavities. It's the explosion of metabolic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver, that are now the leading causes of death worldwide. We are literally being crushed by the weight of our own evolutionary success. You might think that knowing this history gives you a way out. You might think that by understanding the thrifty gene, or the Phaeum fossils, you can finally master that tingle in your jaw. But that is the most dangerous myth of all. Knowing why you crave sugar doesn't make the craving go away, because the craving isn't located in your conscious mind. It's located in the very architecture of your brain stem. It's a hardwired survival command that is older than the concept of you. When you see that shiny, colorful packaging in the store, your brain isn't seeing a processed snack. It's seeing the red fruit in the canopy. It's seeing the honey on the cliff. It's seeing a chance to survive one more winter. Sugar wasn't something we started eating at a specific point in time. It was the catalyst that made us what we are. From the rotting teeth of a 30-million-year-old primate to the rock paintings of a honey thief in Spain, the trail of sugar is the trail of human progress itself. We built empires to get it, we rewrote the laws of chemistry to refine it, and we terraformed the planet to grow it. And in the process, we became a species that is perfectly designed to crave the one thing that is now killing us. The struggle isn't between you and the grocery store, it's between your modern self and the ghost of every ancestor who ever went hungry. Think back to that feeling we started with. That electric prickle at the back of your jaw. The way your mouth waters before the sugar even touches your tongue. You've been told that's a sign of pleasure. You've been told it's just a sweet tooth. But now you know the truth. That tingle is actually a warning from 30 million years ago. It's the sound of a biological trap snapping shut. It's your body preparing for a famine that will never come, by storing energy you will never use, to survive a world that has already disappeared. Every time you feel that zing in your jaw, you aren't just eating a snack. You are participating in a desperate, ancient ritual of survival that has finally run out of room. The story of sugar isn't about when we first started eating it. It's about why we can't stop. It's about the fact that we are the only creature on Earth that has managed to turn its greatest survival advantage into its greatest threat. We are the masters of the planet, the builders of civilizations, the splitters of atoms. And yet, we can be brought to our knees by a single white crystal. The question isn't how we started eating sugar. The question is whether we can ever learn to live in a world that finally gave us exactly what we asked for. If this deep dive into the biological roots of our cravings has changed the way you look at your next meal, you're exactly where you need to be. We spend every week unearthing the hidden history of the human body and the ancient reasons behind our most modern habits. If you want to understand the ghosts that are running your own biology, join us for the next investigation. There is so much more of your own story that you haven't been told yet. What other ancient survival traps are you currently walking into? Now, go back to that physical sensation one last time. Feel that sharp, electric tingle in the back of your jaw. Feel your mouth watering as the brain prepares for the rush. That isn't your body enjoying a treat. That is a 30-million-year-old starvation reflex triggered by a world of infinite plenty. It is the chemical equivalent of a scream, a desperate demand for fuel from an ancestor who died millions of years ago. You aren't tasting sweetness. You are tasting the desperation of the dead. And the most chilling part is that your body doesn't care if the sugar kills you today, as long as it thinks it saved you from a winter that ended 15 million years ago. The tingle isn't a gift. It's a command. And you've already obeyed it.